All right, Joel Klatt joins us every single Monday, courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Don't forget code next round when you sign up at MyBookie.ag for that sign-on bonus up to $200 with any sign-on deposit of $50 or more. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag, code next round. That is MyBookie.ag, code next round. What is up, Klatt? How are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys? What's going on?
Man, we're doing awesome. It's been a wild weekend here in the state of Alabama, as you might imagine. A lot of people are panicked about this. I think the answer is abundantly clear. You can't really play anybody but Jalen Milroe at quarterback now.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I said it, my Monday episode of my podcast came out and I recorded it last night. I actually, and he would never admit this, but I think he used Saturday as a scrimmage. And he's like, okay, I know what we have. I just faced the top 10 opponent at home. I know exactly what we have with Milroe, and I know the type of team that we would need to be and the philosophy that we would have with Jalen Milroe at quarterback. I don't know what I have in these other two guys. And let's face it, at the quarterback position, there's only so much you can learn, even from live scrimmages, within your own team. You don't know how a guy is going to react until you put him out there under the lights. Sometimes, although rare, but sometimes guys perform way above where they do in practice. And you got to figure that out, and I think he used Saturday as that. I mean, let's face it. South Florida was 1-11 last year. Their two best receivers are playing for Colorado. And I mean, that's just the truth. And so when I look at what Saturday was, I think it was purely who's going to be our quarterback moving forward. What do we have? Buckner? Nope, didn't work. Here comes, Ty Simpson, a little better, but that ain't going to cut it either, in particular in a week like this week when you're going to face Ole Miss. So what does that mean? It means that now the coaches have a direction, okay? I think up until this point, Alabama was trying to figure themselves out. And I think that's a fair deal. You've got to understand who you are before you can know where you're going. We used to have this whole old saying, who are we? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? That's really how a team gels. And up until this point, I think Alabama has had to figure out who they are. So who are they? Well, they're a team that's going to have to revert back to an offense that's going to need to play deliberate and methodical. Limit the number of possessions on the opposition. Limit the number of times the opposition can touch the football. You've got to limit the exposure of what your quarterback is going to be doing on obvious passing downs. So Jalen Milroe has to be your quarterback because he's the one that adds the extra hat in the run game. This has to be a run-oriented offense, and you're going to get heavy run-oriented defense. The only way to succeed running the football against a heavy run-oriented defense is if you equate numbers. The only way you can equate numbers is by running the football with your quarterback. He's obviously the best option for doing that, and really the only one of the three that's going to stay healthy in that type of a game plan. So as they're moving forward, they've got to limit the exposure of their defense. They've got to try to stay out of obvious down passing situations. You do that by equating numbers in the run game and really getting after it on first and second down. Good thing for them. They can run it now. Like, as poorly as their offensive line has played in passing situations, they can run the football. I really like Roydell Williams. I really like Jason McClellan. They're averaging just under 7 yards per carry. And if you put Jalen out there, at least, let's face it, they had every chance in the world to beat Texas. And that's a really good team. So here we go. This is what Alabama is going to be. Bryce Young's not walking through that door. This is what Alabama's going to need to be this year.
Joel, I think we all agree Jalen Milroe, best quarterback on that roster, but you're right. He's the only guy that's going to survive. They've given up 10 sacks over the last 2 games. And look, I know Texas, I didn't think they would have a letdown spot. They did against Wyoming. They didn't get it going until the fourth quarter. But Wyoming only had 1 sack on Texas. And this is it's a problem for Alabama right now in pass protection. You've played behind bad offensive lines before. And what does that do to your confidence as a quarterback knowing that you're going to be under duress all day?
Yeah, it's not a good feeling. I can tell you that. Part of my weekly regimen, in particular on Fridays, I would have a meditation session about pain. And this is a true story and about like what I was about to embark on Saturday and what it would feel like and how I was going to react when that happened. Because I knew that it's like this is gonna I'm basically walking into a car accident, and I know that everybody can say that to some extent in a football game, but that's what it's like to be a quarterback, behind an offensive line that is let's just say poor. If they are constantly in passing situations, they're going to lose 2 more times at least. Okay. I just don't trust Jalen Milroe to make the decisions down the field necessary, not based on the film that I saw against Texas. Those interceptions that he threw were really poor. The psyche of a quarterback, though, he's got to forget about what's going to happen in the pass rush, and he's got to pour himself into making the right decisions. All right. This is not a guy that's going to play above the X's and O's in the passing game. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have an above average arm, because he does. But in the passing game, you're not throwing the football, you're passing the football. And there's a huge distinction between the two. You need anticipation and knowledge of windows. And those are the things that he's going to have to pour himself into so that he can help protect himself. This is one of the things that we never talk about when it comes to quarterbacks and pass protection, is that there is a 6th guy in the protection, and that is the quarterback. You've got to know where to go with the football at all times. You cannot snap the ball and then think to yourself like, okay, where are we going? Like, pre-snap, you've got to understand what you're looking at defensively. You got to know where your quick completions are. You've got to know if you're trying to get the ball down the field. What timing is that on? How quickly am I going to have to get down to the check down? How many hitches do I really have behind this offensive line? All of those things are a learned trait, and it's something that you have to prepare for. And again, the only way that you do that is you pour yourself into the details of the passing game and the nuances of the passing game, and making sure that you know that you're the 6th man in the protection.
Meditation before the game. All of a sudden, Bill Walton enters our chat here. I like that a lot. Hey, I got to ask you, a quarterback matchup, Shedeur Sanders, Bo Nix this week, 2:30 ABC in Eugene. And both these quarterbacks enter this game like the aliens in Space Jam. They are massive. Which one of these stars do you think can stand up to the test, knowing that Shedeur is now without his best player?
Yeah. Well, let's say, man, this is a great question. The exact conversation we just had about Milroe, we could have about Sanders, right? Like, he's playing behind an offensive line that is not very good at all. Now, I think he's got better skill on the outside. This is wild to say, but you guys will like, he's got better skill on the outside than Milroe does at Alabama, which is, again, it's wild to even conceive of that.
And he's a better quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's.
But I mean, it's just crazy that 1-11 now has better skill all over the place in Alabama.
I didn't think I had to say that, but yes, you are correct. That seems to be somewhat obvious. I worry about Shedeur because of what's in front of him against Oregon. I don't worry about Bo because he's got such a better supporting cast and a much more balanced offense. Bo Nix can play just within his system against Colorado, and Oregon should and will be favored by quite a bit. I haven't seen the actual number,
20.
So I apologize for that. But 20, that's about where I would put it. I think that's totally fair based on what we saw last week with Colorado. Having said that, and I've got the numbers to back this up, by the way. Let me pull them out real quick. Shedeur Sanders is the most clutch quarterback in college football. Maybe not the best. I think we can have that conversation. He certainly played well, but certainly the most clutch. If you take a look at what he's done in these first 3 games, and remember, behind a really poor offensive line, like when his best is needed, he plays his best. That's what great players do. In the last few drives against TCU, 3 straight touchdown drives, and in every single one of those, they were behind. Like they had to score to come back in those. Nebraska scored on 7 of his last 8 drives. Colorado State scored on this final 3 drives, field goal, then the touchdown. The touchdown was a 98-yard drive in which they also had to have a 2-point conversion, all behind an offensive line that can't protect nor can provide any run game whatsoever. If you look at what his statistics are right now in the fourth quarter through 3 games, he's throwing for 84%, 450 total yards, 14.6 yards per attempt, and 5 touchdowns. Every one of those numbers that I just gave you are number 1 in college football. Now, if I was trying to poke a hole in that, I would say, well, Joel, he's been in tight games, so he's actually playing and has to play well in fourth quarters. Fair enough. But you think about what he's done, in particular with his team down in TCU and against CSU, and this guy is clutch. So this is what I would tell Oregon, Bo Nix, and the rest of that team. You better not be close late, because if number 2 runs out there, like, I'm going to bet on him. He's just got some sort of, we've seen this time and time again. I grew up watching John Elway. He had that magic. There are guys that walk out onto the field and you're just like, well, damn, there's way too much time now. And he's starting to fit that mold. So Oregon better build up a solid lead, because if it's within a possession late, I don't care where the game is at, I'm going to bet on number 2.
Yeah, Cam Newton in 2010, same way. As that season went on, if he had a chance at the end, he willed that Auburn team to victory.
Vince Young at Texas. You know, it's like you got the sense against USC. It's like, well, better not be within striking distance, because he's going to do it.
Jay Norvell, real quick, Clat with us, courtesy of MyBookie.ag. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Sign up at MyBookie.ag. 2 NFL games tonight. You bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag, code next round. MyBookie.ag, code next round. Jay Norvell made that game really personal, and it appeared as though his team fed off of that because they played like it was personal to them, a little too personal, with 178 penalty yards. And if you're Norvell today, you got to take a good long look in the mirror. I think that strategy cost you the game. 178 yards of penalties. That's just ridiculous.
100%. There's no doubt. That game was everything but football in the first quarter.
Yep. Yeah, it was disgusting.
Both sides, by the way.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let Dion off the hook for the way he made it personal. You know, that game was really poorly played early. The team that settled down and executed the best actually was Colorado State for the majority of the game, outside of the absolutely atrocious and dumb penalties that they took. The late hit on Travis, guys, I've refrained from commenting on it because I don't think it's the last we're going to hear about that. I think that that was so egregious. And listen, I'm not absolving Colorado from, like, Colorado did some cheap and dirty things as well. That game going in, the supercharged environment, Lil Wayne coming out, all these, like, it was everything but football, especially early. And I got to be honest, I was holding my breath and just hoping that it wasn't going to deteriorate into something that was going to put a huge black eye on the sport and certainly those 2 programs. I'm glad that it didn't. It ended up being a great and fantastic game, but I think both of those coaches have got to look into the mirror, because you can't go play the rest of your schedule and just think to yourself, we're going to get exterior motivation based on bulletin board material. That is not a sustainable thought or a sustainable motivation and philosophy for a team. It has to be about details. I don't care how amped up you are. Every football game is about execution and details, period. You know, that's why so many different styles of coaches can win. You can be a yeller, you can be a calm guy, you can meditate, you know, like Bill Walton, you can be Dion, you can be Coach Saban. Why? Because it doesn't matter how you arrive. The end point of arrival has to be about execution and the details of that execution. And if you do that, you generally win.
Before you roll, you've got Oklahoma this week. Brent Venables was already on a hot seat, 6-7 coming into year 2. They're 3-0. They've outscored their 3 opponents 167-28. I don't know how much we know about Oklahoma based on opponents, but Dillon Gabriel looks like the early on Dillon Gabriel we saw at Central Florida. Dude's completing 83% of his passes.
You know what's interesting is that this wasn't all that dissimilar from what we were getting last year, which was a team that was fairly bipolar. You know, lose by 1 million to Texas, or let's just say, like, when Gabriel wasn't on the field or when he was injured, they were a shell of what they were with him on the field when he was healthy. I don't think Cincinnati is good enough to beat Oklahoma. Having said that, we'll see how they play. Remember, this is a team that I believe in 6 different games lost a 1-possession game last year. And those are the types of teams that when they fix a couple of things, get a little bit more comfortable, execute just a little bit better in those crunch time scenarios, they can flip what was a losing year into a really remarkable year. I will say this about Oklahoma. If I was looking at odds of teams that are 12, 13 or lower that could make the playoff, I would bet on Oklahoma. Of all of those teams, I think Oklahoma would have the best shot to make a run of all the teams that are now in kind of, I would consider it the back half of the top 25.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Hey, man,
wake up
they're
call
dogs
this
by
week.
20 for a reason.
That pass though to Horn, the way he looked off the safety. I'm not a football guy, but even I was like, oh, let me see the high 22. That was a great look off there. It's such a cerebral play.
I've watched it. Trust me, like I love watching coaches tape. And Sarah, my wife, has started to be like, do you have to do that? Because I sit, like, we go to bed and I sit there and I just watch it on my iPad for a few hours. But I've started to be that guy that's like, oh man, when I really like it, or ugh. And so like I'm watching Alabama and their offensive line makes me be like, oh, this is gross, and she's like, will you relax? And then I watch Shedeur and then make it through a few. So I'm that guy that now is reacting to the coach's tape.
Hey,
Way to go, guys.
How long did you meditate before the Big 12 championship game against Texas?
Not long enough. There wasn't enough hours in the entire week leading up to that game.
Did you know it was going to be that bad, though?
Yes. I mean, that team was unbelievable. We backed in. We got housed by Nebraska the week before. The wheels were kind of coming off. There was a lot of stuff going on internally. And we backed into that game. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I remember how hard they hit me in the first meeting. We played them in Austin earlier in the year. I think we lost like 42-17 or something like that. Played hard, but they were so good. I got absolutely crushed in the first meeting against Texas in Austin. Got a concussion in that game, just obliterated. I remember how I felt that Sunday. So the whole week leading up to the Big 12 championship game, that's all I was thinking about, was just like, hey, man, like, whatever you do, get up off the field. And I remember I was married at the time to my wife, Sarah, and I told her, I was like, listen, don't worry. Like, I'll make it. I've made it this far. This was like my 40th start or something, 38th start. So I was like, I'll be all right. And like, I'll get up. Don't worry. I'll get up. And lo and behold, third quarter, face down, unconscious, and like not moving. And she's like, oh my goodness.
It's Joel Klatt, Big Noon Kick, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, Saturday on Fox. Klatt, thank you, man. Have a great week.
You bet. You guys have a good one.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next week. Klatt with us every week, courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign up at MyBookie.ag. Get that sign-on bonus up to $200. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag. Code next round.